Hi, I'd like to tell you about the history of this saw-whet owl chick. With Discover Owls, we do research, conservation, and education on owls in Manitoba and around the world. And part of that is studying owls when they nest. So we were quite fortunate in this summer, this spring, to have a pair of saw-whet owls settle right in the woodlot outside our house. And we were able to set up a camera to monitor the breeding behavior of the saw-whet owl. It's quite surprising that the most common owl in Manitoba is so little studied. In fact, when we searched the literature, there was only one paper that kind of documented and quantified the breeding behavior, including prey deliveries and how often the female turns her eggs and whatnot. So this was a great opportunity right in our own backyards to study this really charismatic species. We set up the camera and everything was going just beautifully. The male was bringing in food, a combination of small mammals including field mice called voles, shrews, and a variety of birds as well. And we would find that sometimes, the first time a northern water thrush showed up on our farm during the spring migration, lo and behold, one showed up in the nest box. So it was a great research program that was underway, and then catastrophe hit. One day we noticed from the recordings of the nest box, the male didn't deliver food. And if it's a rainy night or a particularly windy night, that can happen. But the second day, the male didn't deliver food. So we knew something had happened to the male. This small owl, the size of a coffee cup, is also vulnerable to predation by things like Cooper's hawks, which also nest on our farm, or other threats. So it was very likely that the male had been killed. So we tried to, at that point, our kind of a research project was terminated, but we went into conservation mode. And what we did was we tried to supplement the diet of the female who was brooding the young. At that point, they were too small to generate their own heat, so she had to keep them warm. And we were able to introduce frozen thawed lab mice into the nest box. And she was eating those, but she wasn't really, providing enough food to the young, or things were just off perhaps. And so unfortunately we watched a couple of the young actually perish, even though they were surrounded by food. And one young, for example, wandered off away from the female and she didn't retrieve it, which is fascinating behavior, but it's quite sad to watch. And in the end, when there was only one chick left, that was the first chick that hatched, we decided to contact conservation in Manitoba and indicate that we were going to collaborate with the Wildlife Haven to try to rescue this young chick. So we caught and banded the female, and we took the chick and we then passed it on to the good folks at the Wildlife Haven who took over its care. We wanted to ensure that at least one chick made it from this nesting effort. The female hung around for a day or two, but then took off. And so that was the end of the nesting part of that story. And the Wildlife Haven and their staff, they took excellent care of this chick and culminated in its eventual release when we were able to band it and release it at Birds Hill Provincial Park. So all in all, I guess a silver lining came out of this. A bit of positive news out of an otherwise tragic nesting attempt.
We've got this tiny little saw-whet that came in just at the beginning of summer, and it was so small. It was just over 50 grams. You can imagine how tiny that is. We even had a few team members needing to consult to figure out what species this is. It looked almost like a little songbird, but it came in, it was orphaned. We partnered with Jim Duncan, who was keeping an eye on these saw-whets. And unfortunately, the parents passed away, the siblings passed away, but this little one was quite hardy and was able to survive. So we brought him into care, and our whole team got to work right away. It's quite complicated when you've got a orphaned owl baby. You know, usually they get all of their care from their parents. So when we have to replicate that here at Wildlife Haven, it takes a lot of different strategies to do that. So we had to make sure that it was hydrated well enough in the beginning. So we were giving sub-Q injections and then very carefully introducing food. So we introduced hand feeding at first and eventually got him up to hunting, which is what he needs to be released out in the wild. But to really make sure that this little saw-whet owl understood that he was an owl and not getting him acclimatized to humans as caregivers, there's a whole lot of strategies we have to use there as well. So when our team was hand feeding them, we used ghosting, so actually disguising our figure, disguising our face. We had saw-whet little masks on us to really try to replicate the fact that saw-whets should be their caregivers. Even if in its incubator at 11 days old when it came in, we were playing saw-whet sounds for its enclosure. We had saw-whet pictures all around, and really no FaceTime where he could actually see humans as his caregiver. And then we eventually were able to move him to a bigger cage, a bigger enclosure, make sure that the flight was good, he was strong enough. And the last step was to have him in an outside enclosure where he got to really get acclimatized to the weather, to the sounds of nature. We used mice to make sure that he was able to hunt like he would out in the wild. And finally, after all of those steps, he was ready for release back into the wild.
The two ends of the band butt together. So bigger birds of prey or other larger birds with strong beaks, they have a lock-on flange. But these guys are, they're mighty, but they're small. So these bands are deemed to be okay for the species. Now who grabs who? She's nice and plump.
Yeah.
With her feathers.
Beautiful eyes.
Now they're really orange.
Orange.
Yeah.
So the plumage on the juveniles is the chocolate brown, two-tone browns. Those are different from what the adults look like. And when the species was first, when someone first found a young saw-whet owl, they actually thought it was a different species because it looks so different from the adult.